The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Memphis, Tennessee, turning the streets into rivers and the sky into a permanent shade of gray. It was the kind of October weather that made people stay inside, that muffled sounds and swallowed secrets, that created the perfect cover for things that should never happen behind closed doors. The city seemed to hold its breath during storms like this one. The Mississippi River swelled against its banks, brown and churning, while the streets of downtown emptied of their usual foot traffic. Store owners put up sandbags, homeowners checked their basements, and everyone waited for the clouds to finally break. But in the Riverside Apartments complex on the east side of the city, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging within. 11-year-old Maya Johnson sat on the floor of her bedroom closet, her back pressed against the wall, her knees pulled up to her chest. The closet was small and dark, barely big enough to hold her, but it was the only place in the apartment where she felt safe. The only place where the sounds from the living room seemed far away, muffled by coats and boxes and the desperate pounding of her own heart. She had discovered this hiding spot 3 months ago, during one of Derek's first explosions. Back then, she hadn't known that the anger would become a pattern, that the violence would escalate, that the charming man who brought her mother flowers and took them out for ice cream would transform into something unrecognizable behind closed doors. Now she knew, now she understood that monsters didn't always look like monsters. Sometimes they looked like normal people. Sometimes they smiled and laughed and made promises they never intended to keep. Sometimes they waited until they had you trapped before showing their true faces. Through the thin walls, she could hear them. Her mother's voice, high and pleading, and his voice, Derek's voice, low and dangerous, like thunder rolling across a darkening sky. "I told you not to talk to him," Derek was saying. "I told you what would happen if you did. I wasn't talking to anyone, Derek, I swear. I was just at work. Please, you have to believe me. You're lying. You're always lying." Maya squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her hands over her ears, but she couldn't block out what came next. The crash of something breaking, her mother's cry of pain, the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. She'd heard these sounds before, too many times. Ever since Derek had moved in 6 months ago, ever since her mother had fallen for his charm and his promises and his lies, their apartment had become a war zone. Maya had learned to read the warning signs, to sense when the storm was coming. She'd learned to hide, to stay quiet, to make herself as small as possible. But tonight was different. Tonight, the sounds were worse than they'd ever been. Tonight she could hear her mother crying in a way that made Maya's blood run cold. Not the quiet, resigned tears she'd grown used to, but something rawer, something more desperate, something that sounded like goodbye. Maya's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. It was an old phone, a hand-me-down from her mother with a cracked screen and a battery that barely held a charge. But it was her lifeline, her only connection to the outside world. She'd thought about calling 911 before, many times, but Derek had warned her what would happen if she ever did. He'd told her the police would take her away from her mother, put her in foster care, split them up forever. He'd told her that no one would believe a kid over an adult, that they'd say she was making it up, that it would only make things worse. And part of Maya believed him. Part of her was terrified that he was right. But tonight, as she listened to her mother's cries, Maya knew she had to do something. She couldn't just sit here in the dark and wait for the silence that might mean the worst had happened. Her fingers trembled as she opened her phone's messaging app. She didn't want to call anyone because Derek might hear. A text message was quieter, safer. She could send it without making a sound. But who should she text? Her mother's phone was in the living room, probably smashed like everything else Derek touched when he got angry. She didn't have her grandmother's number memorized. She didn't have any friends whose parents she trusted enough to ask for help. Maya stared at the screen, her mind racing. She remembered something her teacher had said once about how you could text 911 in some places now, in emergencies. She'd never done it before, didn't even know if it would work, but she had to try. With shaking fingers, she typed the numbers. 911. But her hands were trembling so badly that she made a mistake. Instead of 911, she typed 914. And in her panic, in her desperation to get the message out before Derek came looking for her, she didn't notice the error. She just started typing. "He's hitting my mum. Please help us. I'm scared. We live at 2847 Riverside Drive, apartment 4B. Please hurry. I don't know what to do." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, before the fear could paralyze her completely. The message disappeared from her screen, flying out into the digital void, and Maya could only pray that someone, somewhere, would receive it. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that her message hadn't gone to emergency services at all. It had gone to a firefighter named Marcus Williams, whose personal cell phone number just happened to be 901-555-0914. Marcus was sitting in the kitchen of Fire Station 27, halfway through a cup of coffee and a crossword puzzle, when his phone buzzed with an incoming text. At 43 years old, he was one of the most experienced firefighters in Memphis, with 20 years of service and more rescues than he could count. He'd seen things that would give most people nightmares, had pulled bodies from burning buildings and cut survivors from mangled cars and held the hands of dying strangers in their final moments. The station was quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that made veterans nervous. In Marcus's experience, quiet shifts often ended with big calls, as if the universe was just saving up its chaos for one dramatic moment. His fellow firefighters were scattered around the building, some sleeping in the bunk room, others watching a basketball game in the common area, a few working out in the small gym they'd cobbled together from donated equipment. Marcus preferred the kitchen during these quiet hours. It reminded him of his grandmother's house, the smell of coffee always brewing, the soft tick of a clock on the wall, the sense that everything was exactly as it should be. He'd been working on the same crossword puzzle for 3 days now, stuck on a 7-letter word for unexpected blessing. Nothing fazed him anymore, or so he thought. He picked up his phone casually, expecting a message from his daughter or maybe his ex-wife asking him to switch weekends. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. "He's hitting my mom. Please help us. I'm scared. We live at 2847 Riverside Drive, apartment 4B. Please hurry. I don't know what to do." Marcus stared at the screen, his coffee forgotten, his crossword abandoned. For a long moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. This had to be a mistake, a wrong number, some kind of prank. But the words on the screen didn't look like a prank. They looked like terror. They looked like a child in danger, reaching out desperately to anyone who might listen. His first instinct was to text back, to ask who this was and how they'd gotten his number. But something stopped him. If this was real, if there was really a kid out there hiding from violence, the last thing she needed was her phone buzzing with messages that might give away her hiding spot. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His partner, a younger firefighter named Damon Harris, looked up from his own phone with raised eyebrows. "Everything okay, Marcus?" "I don't know." Marcus showed him the message. "Just got this. Wrong number, obviously, but—" Damon's eyes widened as he read the text. "Jesus, you think it's real?" "I don't know. But if it is, there's a kid out there who thinks she just texted 911. She's waiting for help that isn't coming. So what do you do? Call the cops?" Marcus was already reaching for his jacket. "I'm going over there. 2847 Riverside Drive isn't far from here. Maybe 10 minutes. "Marcus, that's not our job. We're firefighters, not cops. If there's domestic violence happening, that's a police matter." "I know that. But this kid texted me specifically because she couldn't call. Because she's hiding and she's scared and she doesn't want to make noise. If I call the cops and they show up with sirens blazing, it might make things worse. It might put her in more danger." Damon stood up too, his expression troubled. "So what's your plan?" "I don't have one yet. I just know I can't sit here and do nothing while some little girl is hiding in a closet, praying for help that isn't coming." He was out the door before Damon could argue further, his keys in his hand, his heart pounding with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. The rain was still falling, drumming against the roof of his pickup truck as he climbed inside and started the engine. As he drove through the wet Memphis streets, Marcus found himself thinking about his own daughter. Jessica was 14 now, living with her mother across town, but he could still remember when she was 11. Still remember the way she used to look at him like he could fix anything, solve any problem, make any monster disappear. What if Jessica had been in this situation? What if she'd been hiding in a closet somewhere, terrified, sending messages to a stranger because she had no one else to turn to? The thought made his grip tighten on the steering wheel. He pulled up outside 2847 Riverside Drive just as the rain began to let up. It was a rundown apartment complex, 3 stories of faded brick and rusted railings, the kind of place where people lived because they had no other choice. The parking lot was mostly empty, puddles reflecting the glow of flickering streetlights. Marcus had been to buildings like this before, usually for fires or medical emergencies. He knew the layout instinctively. The narrow hallways, the thin walls, the apartments packed too close together. Places like this were tinderboxes, both literally and figuratively. Problems spread quickly here, whether they were flames or violence or despair. The complex had seen better days, probably decades ago. The brick facade was crumbling in places, the railings rusted through, the parking lot more pothole than pavement. A for rent sign hung crookedly from one of the ground floor windows, its letters faded to near illegibility by years of sun and rain. But there were signs of life, too. A child's bicycle chained to a railing, a potted plant struggling to survive on a second-floor balcony, curtains in cheerful patterns, attempts to make small spaces feel like homes. The people who lived here were doing their best with what they had. Marcus respected that. He'd grown up in a neighborhood not so different from this one. Marcus sat in his truck for a moment, watching the building, trying to figure out his next move. He wasn't a cop. He had no authority here, no badge, no weapon. If he knocked on that door and found himself face to face with an abusive man, he had no legal right to intervene. But he also couldn't just drive away. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Is anyone there? Please." He won't stop. I can hear her crying. I think she's really hurt this time. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He'd spent 20 years running into burning buildings, but this was a different kind of fire, the kind that burned behind closed doors, invisible to the outside world, consuming families from the inside out. He typed a careful reply. "I got your message. Help is coming. Stay hidden. Stay quiet." "What's your name?" He watched the screen, waiting, praying the phone wouldn't make a sound that gave the girl away. After an agonizing minute, a response appeared. "Maya. My name is Maya. Who is this? Are you the police?" Marcus hesitated, then typed, "My name is Marcus. I'm a firefighter. You accidentally texted my phone instead of 911, but I'm here. I'm outside your building right now. I'm going to help you." Inside the closet, Maya stared at her phone in confusion and disbelief. A firefighter? How had she texted a firefighter? She'd been so sure she'd typed 911 correctly, so certain that help was on the way. But somehow, impossibly, a stranger named Marcus was outside her building. A stranger who had received her message by accident and come anyway. A stranger who was promising to help. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or more terrified than before. Another crash from the living room made her flinch. Her mother had stopped crying, which was somehow worse. Silence meant either that Derek had calmed down or that her mother couldn't make sounds anymore. Maya didn't know which possibility frightened her more. With trembling fingers, she typed back, "I'm in the bedroom closet. He doesn't know I have a phone. Please don't let him hear you. He's really angry tonight." Marcus read the message and made a decision. He couldn't just knock on the front door like a normal visitor. That would alert the abuser, might escalate the situation, might put both Maya and her mother in even greater danger. He needed to be smart about this. He stepped out of his truck and approached the building, his eyes scanning for apartment 4B. It was on the second floor, near the back of the complex. There was a fire escape running up the side of the building, old and rusty, but probably still functional. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911. He kept his voice low as he explained the situation to the dispatcher, giving them the address, describing the text messages he'd received, requesting a quiet approach without sirens that might trigger further violence. "Sir, we'll dispatch officers immediately," the dispatcher said. "Please do not attempt to intervene yourself. Wait for law enforcement to arrive." "I understand," Marcus said, though he had no intention of just waiting. Every minute that passed was another minute Maya was hiding in that closet, another minute her mother might be getting hurt. The police would come, but they might not come fast enough. He ended the call and began climbing the fire escape. The metal groaned under his weight, rain slicked and treacherous, but Marcus had climbed worse. He'd scaled burning buildings, crawled through collapsed structures, descended into flooded basements. A rusty fire escape in the rain was nothing. He reached the second floor and crept along the exterior walkway until he found apartment 4B. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see into the living room. A lamp had been knocked over, casting strange shadows across the walls. Broken glass glittered on the carpet, and there, in the center of the room, he saw them. A woman was on the floor, curled into a ball, her arms wrapped protectively around her head. A man stood over her, his fists clenched, his face contorted with rage. He was saying something, his lips moving, but Marcus couldn't hear the words through the glass. He didn't need to hear them. He'd seen enough. Marcus pulled out his phone and texted Maya. "I can see into your apartment. I see your mom and the man. The police are on their way. I need you to stay in the closet and stay quiet. Can you do that for me?" The response came quickly. "Yes. Is my mom okay?" "I can't hear her anymore. She's alive. I can see her moving. Just hold on a little longer. Help is almost there." Inside the closet, Maya clutched her phone like a lifeline. A firefighter she'd never met was outside her window, watching over her, promising that help was coming. It seemed impossible, like something out of one of the stories her mother used to read her before Derek came into their lives, before everything changed. She thought about her mother, lying on the living room floor, and felt tears streaming down her face. Her mom had tried so hard to protect her from this, had sent her to her room whenever Derek's mood started to shift, had taken the blows herself rather than let him turn his anger on Maya. Her mother was the bravest person Maya knew, even if she didn't always make the right choices about who to trust. The sound of sirens in the distance made Maya's breath catch. They were coming. The police were really coming. Marcus had kept his promise. In the living room, Derek heard the sirens too. His head snapped toward the window, his expression shifting from rage to panic. "What did you do?" he snarled at the woman on the floor. "Did you call someone? Did you tell someone?" "I didn't," Maya's mother gasped. "I swear, I didn't call anyone. My phone is right there, Derek. Look at it." "I didn't call anyone." Derek grabbed the phone from the coffee table, scrolled through it frantically, found no outgoing calls or messages, but the sirens were getting closer. Someone had called. Someone new. "Where's the kid?" he demanded suddenly. "Where's Maya?" "In her room. She's in her room, Derek, please. Just leave her alone. This is between us. If that little brat called the cops, I swear to God." He started toward the hallway, toward Maya's room, his hands still clenched into fists. Through the window, Marcus saw him coming and felt his heart stop. There was no time to wait for the police, no time to follow protocol. In about 10 seconds, that man was going to reach Maya's door, and if he found out she was the one who'd called for help, there was no telling what he might do. Marcus made a split-second decision. He grabbed a decorative flower pot from the fire escape railing and hurled it through the living room window. The crash was deafening. Glass exploded inward, raining down on the carpet and furniture. Derek spun around, stunned, his attention jerked away from the hallway. Through the shattered window, he saw Marcus, soaking wet and breathing hard, standing on the fire escape. "Get away from them!" Marcus shouted. "The police are here. It's over!" For a moment, Derek just stared at him, processing what was happening. Then his face twisted into something ugly. "Who the hell are you? You can't just break into my home. I'll have you arrested." "I didn't break in. I broke a window, and I'll break a lot more than that if you take one more step toward that girl's room." Blue and red lights were flashing in the parking lot now. Doors were slamming. Voices were calling out. The cavalry had arrived. Derek looked from Marcus to the window to the lights outside, and something in him seemed to collapse. The rage drained out of his face, replaced by something smaller and meaner and more afraid. Without another word, he bolted for the back door, trying to escape before the officers could reach him. He didn't make it far. Marcus heard the shouts, the scuffle, the click of handcuffs. Then silence, except for the rain still falling and the distant wail of an ambulance approaching. Marcus climbed through the broken window, glass crunching under his boots, and knelt beside the woman on the floor. "Ma'am, can you hear me? The paramedics are coming. You're safe now. He's gone." She looked up at him with eyes that were swollen and bruised, but somehow still beautiful, still alive. "Maya," she whispered, "my daughter. Is she okay?" "She's fine. She's the one who saved you. She texted for help." The woman's face crumpled, tears mixing with blood on her cheeks. "She shouldn't have had to do that. She's just a child. She shouldn't have had to save me. No, she shouldn't have, but she did, because she loves you. And because she's incredibly brave." Maya's bedroom door opened, and a small face peered out. When she saw the broken glass, the police officers flooding into the apartment, her mother on the floor, she started to cry. But when she saw Marcus, the stranger who had answered her accidental text, who had come when no one else would have, something shifted in her expression. Hope. It looked like hope. She ran to her mother and threw herself into her arms, both of them sobbing, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck finally reaching shore. Marcus stood back, giving them space, feeling something loosen in his chest that he hadn't even realized was tight. He'd spent 20 years pulling people out of burning buildings, but this was different. This was the rescue that would stay with him forever. A police officer approached him, notebook in hand. "Sir, we're going to need a statement from you. Can you tell me what happened here tonight?" Marcus looked at Maya, still wrapped in her mother's arms, still crying, but safe now. Finally safe. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I can tell you exactly what happened. A little girl was scared, and she reached out for help, and by some miracle her message found its way to me." The officer raised an eyebrow. "A miracle?" Marcus smiled, just a little. "Something like that." The next few hours were a blur of statements and questions and paperwork. Maya and her mother were taken to the hospital, where doctors treated the woman's injuries. A broken rib, a concussion, bruises covering nearly every inch of her body. Derek was booked on multiple charges, including assault, battery, and domestic violence. He wouldn't be getting out anytime soon. Marcus gave his statement to the police, explaining about the misdirected text, his decision to come to the address, his call to 911, his intervention when Derek headed for Maya's room. The officers listened with expressions that shifted from skeptical to impressed to something that looked almost like gratitude. "You know you could have gotten yourself killed," one of them said. "Breaking that window, confronting him like that guy could have had a weapon." "I know," Marcus admitted, "but that little girl was counting on me. She thought she'd texted 911. She thought help was coming. I couldn't let her down. Most people would have just called us and let us handle it. I did call you, but you weren't going to get here fast enough." "Not for her." The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. You did good tonight, Mr. Williams. That girl and her mother might not be alive right now if you hadn't shown up." It was nearly 3 in the morning when Marcus finally made it back to the fire station. Damon was waiting for him, wide awake despite the hour, his face tight with worry. "Man, I've been trying to call you for hours. What happened? Is everyone okay?" Marcus sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline finally fading. Everyone's okay. The mum's pretty beat up, but she'll recover. The boyfriend's in jail. And the girl, Maya, she's safe. So you really went over there? You really got involved? Yeah, I did. Damon shook his head slowly. You're crazy, you know that? You're a firefighter, not a cop. That wasn't your call to make. Maybe not. But when a kid sends you a text saying, he's hitting my mum, you don't just sit there and do nothing. You can't. Damon was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down across from Marcus and said, tell me everything. And so Marcus did. He told him about the drive through the rain, the fire escape, the broken window, the look on Maya's face when she realized she was finally safe. He told him about the terror of those moments when Derek headed for her room, about the split-second decision to throw that flower pot, about the relief that washed through him when the police arrived. By the end, Damon was leaning back in his chair, a strange expression on his face. That's incredible, man. That's honestly incredible. That kid must think you're some kind of superhero. I'm not a superhero. I'm just a guy who answered his phone. You know what I mean. You didn't have to go over there. You didn't have to get involved. Most people would have just forwarded the message to the cops and gone about their night. But you couldn't do that, could you? Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it. Why hadn't he just let the police handle it? Why had he felt so compelled to go himself? My daughter, he said finally. I kept thinking about Jessica. What if she was in trouble somewhere, scared and alone, reaching out to a stranger for help? I'd want that stranger to do something. I'd want them to show up. Damon nodded slowly. That makes sense. You're a good dad, Marcus. Even if Jess doesn't live with you anymore, she's lucky to have you. I don't know about that, but I know that Maya's going to be okay. And that's what matters. The next morning, Marcus went to the hospital. He didn't know if Maya or her mother would want to see him, didn't know if his presence would be welcome or intrusive. But he had to know they were really okay. He had to see it for himself. The Memphis morning was crisp and clear, the storm finally having moved on to trouble some other city. Sunlight streamed through the hospital windows as Marcus walked through the corridors, following the signs to the third floor. He'd spent countless hours in hospitals over the years, bringing in patients from fire scenes and car accidents, waiting for news about injured colleagues. But this felt different, this felt personal. He stopped at the nurse's station to ask for directions and was met by a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. I'm looking for Denise Johnson and her daughter Maya. They were brought in last night. The nurse checked her computer. Room 312. Down the hall, third door on the left. Are you family? Marcus hesitated. No, not exactly. I'm the one who called 911 last night. I just wanted to make sure they're okay. Something shifted in the nurse's expression. You're the firefighter? The one who broke the window? Word travels fast. Honey, that story's been all over the station. The night shift couldn't stop talking about it. She smiled warmly. That little girl is lucky you answered your phone. I'm the lucky one, Marcus said quietly. She's the brave one. He found them in a room on the third floor. Maya's mother, whose name was Denise Johnson, was sitting up in bed, her face bruised, but her eyes clear. Maya was curled up in a chair beside her, asleep, one hand still holding her mother's. The room was small but bright, sunlight streaming through the window and casting warm patterns across the linoleum floor. A vase of flowers sat on the bedside table, probably from the hospital's gift shop, a small gesture of normalcy in the midst of so much chaos. Denise looked up when Marcus appeared in the doorway. For a moment they just stared at each other, two strangers who had been brought together by the most unlikely of circumstances. You're him, Denise said quietly, the firefighter. The one Maya texted? That's me, Marcus Williams. He took a tentative step into the room. I just wanted to make sure you were both okay. I hope I'm not intruding. Intruding? Denise's eyes filled with tears. You saved our lives. If you hadn't come when you did, if you hadn't called the police, hadn't stopped him from going after Maya, she couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't give voice to what might have happened. Maya saved you, Marcus said gently. She's the one who had the courage to reach out. I just happened to be the one who received her message. By accident, she told me. She meant to text 911 but got the number wrong. That's right, one digit off, 914 instead of 911, and somehow that wrong number was my phone. Denise shook her head slowly, wincing slightly from the pain the movement caused. My mother would call that fate. She always believed things happen for a reason. Maybe she's right. Marcus looked at Maya, still sleeping peacefully in the chair. Her face was relaxed in sleep, the tension of the previous night temporarily erased. She looked so young, so vulnerable. It was hard to believe this was the same girl who had found the courage to reach out for help in the middle of a nightmare. Your daughter is incredibly brave, Ms. Johnson. What she did, reaching out for help when she was that scared, not knowing if anyone would answer, that takes more courage than most adults have. She's always been like that. Brave. Too brave for her own good sometimes. Denise reached over and gently stroked her daughter's hair, her touch infinitely tender. She's been protecting me since Derek moved in. Hiding my phone so he couldn't check my messages, making excuses when I came to school with bruises, 11 years old, and she's been acting like a parent. That shouldn't have been her job. No! It shouldn't have. That's my fault. I should have left him a long time ago. I should have been stronger. It's not about strength, Marcus said, moving closer to the bed. Leaving an abusive situation is one of the hardest things a person can do. There are 1,000 reasons why women stay, and none of them have anything to do with weakness. Denise looked at him with surprise. You sound like you know something about this. My sister, she was in a relationship like yours for almost 10 years. I watched her go through it, tried to help, didn't always know what to do. But I learned a lot about how complicated it is, how hard it is to leave, how brave you have to be to finally break free. Did she get out? Eventually. It took a long time and it wasn't easy, but she did it. She's remarried now, happy, living in Nashville with 2 kids and a husband who treats her like gold. It took her a while to believe she deserved that, but she does. Denise was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. Marcus could see the wheels turning in her mind, could see her struggling to imagine a future that looked different from the past. Then she said, I want that for Maya. I want her to grow up seeing what a healthy relationship looks like. I want her to know that what Derek did isn't love. It was never love. She'll learn. She has a good mother, and now she'll have a chance to heal, to be a kid again, to stop carrying burdens that were never hers to carry. Maya stirred in her chair, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up with recognition. You came back, she said, sitting up quickly. I wasn't sure if you would. I had to make sure you were okay, both of you. Maya climbed out of her chair and walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. She was small for her age, with dark braids and serious brown eyes that had seen too much. But there was something else there too, beneath the wariness, something that looked like the beginning of trust. Thank you, she said quietly, for answering my message, for coming to help us. I know you didn't have to do that. Marcus crouched down so he was at her eye level. You're right. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. When I got your text, when I read what was happening, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. You were brave enough to reach out. The least I could do was brave enough to show up. My teacher says bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared. Your teacher is a wise person. I was really scared last night, more scared than I've ever been. I know you were, but you did it anyway. You sent that message even though you were terrified. That's the definition of courage, Maya. She looked at him for a long moment, then did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. Marcus froze for a second, then hugged her back. This brave little girl who had reached through the void and somehow found him. Thank you, she whispered again. Thank you for being real. Over the next few hours, Maya and her mother had more visitors. Detectives came to take official statements. A social worker arrived to assess the situation and discuss resources available for domestic violence survivors. Denise's mother, Maya's grandmother, rushed in from her home in Arkansas, having driven through the night as soon as she heard the news. The grandmother, a sturdy woman in her 60s named Louise, swept Maya into her arms and held her for a long time without speaking. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "My brave, brave girl," she said. "You did what grown folks couldn't do. You called for help." "It was an accident, Grandma. I meant to call 911, but I texted the wrong number." Louise shook her head firmly. "Wasn't no accident, baby. That was God's hand, guiding that message to exactly the right person. That firefighter who showed up, he was meant to be your angel that night." Maya glanced at Marcus, who was standing quietly by the window, giving the family their space. "He's not an angel, Grandma. He's just a regular person." "Regular people can be angels too, sweetheart. That's the secret the good Lord doesn't tell everybody. Angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they drive pickup trucks and climb fire escapes in the rain." Despite everything, Maya smiled. Marcus left the hospital later that afternoon after exchanging phone numbers with Denise and promising to check in on them. The rain had finally stopped, and the sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, painting the Memphis skyline in shades of gold and orange. He sat in his truck for a while, just thinking. About Maya, about Denise, about his sister and his daughter and all the invisible battles being fought behind closed doors every day. About how sometimes the most important rescues weren't from burning buildings at all. His phone buzzed with a text. It was from Maya's number, though the message was clearly from Denise. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did. You gave my daughter her childhood back. You gave me a second chance. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that we'll never forget you." Marcus smiled and typed back, "You don't need to thank me. Just take care of that brave girl of yours. And if you ever need anything at all, you have my number." He started the truck and headed back to the station, ready to finish his shift, ready to face whatever calls came next. But something had shifted inside him, some fundamental understanding of why he did this job and what it really meant to save a life. 20 years of fires, and it was a misdirected text message that had taught him the most important lesson of all. Sometimes you don't choose the rescue chooses you. 3 months later, Maya Johnson stood at the front of her classroom, presenting a report she'd written for English class. The assignment had been simple: write about someone who inspires you. Most of her classmates had written about athletes or singers or historical figures from their textbooks. Maya had written about a firefighter named Marcus Williams. The 3 months between that rainy night and this moment had been a journey of transformation for the Johnson family. They'd moved out of the apartment on Riverside Drive within a week of the incident, staying with Grandma Louise in Arkansas for a month while Denise healed, both physically and emotionally. The restraining order against Derek had been granted immediately, and his trial was scheduled for the spring. Maya had started seeing a counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Evans, who specialized in helping children process trauma. At first, Maya had been reluctant to talk, keeping her answers short and her eyes on the floor. But Dr. Evans was patient, and slowly, session by session, Maya began to open up. "It's not your job to protect your mother," Dr. Evans had told her one afternoon, about 6 weeks into their sessions. "I know that's what you've been doing, and I know it came from a place of love. But you're a child, Maya. You should be worried about homework and friendships and what you're going to wear to school, not about keeping your mother safe from violence." "But someone had to do it," Maya had said. "If I didn't, who would? That's exactly my point. It shouldn't have been on you, and now it's not anymore. Your mother is safe. You're safe. Derek is in jail, and he's going to stay there for a long time. You can finally just be a kid again." It had taken Maya a while to believe that, to stop flinching at loud noises, to stop checking the locks on the doors and windows every night before bed. to stop sleeping with her phone clutched in her hand, ready to call for help at a moment's notice. But slowly, gradually, she was learning to breathe again. They'd returned to Memphis in November, moving into a new apartment in a better neighborhood, a place with security cameras and friendly neighbors and no memories of Derek's rage. Denise had found a job at a local hospital, working in the billing department, and Maya had enrolled in a new school where nobody knew her history. It was a fresh start, a chance to be someone other than the girl from the broken home. And now, standing in front of her new classmates, Maya was ready to share her story, or at least part of it. "The person who inspires me the most isn't famous," she read aloud, her voice clear and steady. "He's not on TV or in any history books. But he saved my life and my mom's life, and he did it by accident." Her classmates leaned forward, intrigued. Even Mrs. Patterson, her English teacher, was listening with unusual attention. "3 months ago, I was hiding in my closet while a bad man was hurting my mom. I tried to text 911, but I was shaking so badly that I typed the wrong number. My message went to a stranger instead. A firefighter named Marcus, who had just gotten home from work." Maya paused, gathering herself. This was the hard part, the part she hadn't told anyone except the police and the counselor her mum had started taking her to. Most people would have ignored a message like that. Or maybe they would have called the police and figured it wasn't their problem. But Marcus didn't do that. He got in his truck and drove to our apartment in the rain. He climbed up a fire escape in the dark. He broke a window to stop the bad man from finding me. He stayed with us until the police came and made sure we were safe. She looked up from her paper, meeting the eyes of her classmates. When I asked Marcus why he did all that for people he'd never met, he said something I'll never forget. He said, "When someone reaches out for help, you answer. That's what heroes do." Maya folded her paper carefully. "Marcus taught me that heroes aren't just in comic books or movies. They're regular people who choose to do the right thing, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when it's not their job. He taught me that one person really can make a difference. And he taught me that sometimes wrong numbers can lead to the right people." The classroom was silent for a moment. Then Mrs. Patterson began to clap, and the rest of the class joined in. Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and pride. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "So this firefighter guy, do you still talk to him?" "Yeah," Maya said, a smile breaking across her face. "He texts me every week to check in. He came to my birthday party last month. He's like, I don't know, like a really cool uncle or something." "That's awesome," another girl said. "It's like something out of a movie." "Except it's real," Maya replied. "That's what makes it better." After class, Mrs. Patterson asked her to stay behind for a moment. "That was a beautiful report, Maya. One of the best I've heard in all my years of teaching. Thank you. I know things have been hard for you lately, the situation with your mum, everything that happened, but you're handling it with so much grace and courage. I want you to know how proud I am of you." Maya thought about Marcus's words, about bravery not being the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. "I'm not that brave," she said honestly. "I was scared the whole time. I'm still scared sometimes." "That's what makes it brave, sweetheart. Anyone can be strong when they're not afraid. Real courage is what you showed that night, reaching out for help, even when you didn't know if anyone would answer." Maya nodded slowly, understanding something she hadn't fully grasped before. She had spent so long thinking of Marcus as the hero of that night, but maybe, just maybe, she had been a hero too. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her mum. "How did your presentation go? I hope you knocked it out of the park." Maya smiled and typed back, "It went great. I'll tell you all about it when I get home." Home. Such a simple word, but it meant something different now. It meant the new apartment she and her mum had moved into, the one without Derek, without fear, without locked closets and hidden phones. It meant quiet evenings doing homework together, Saturday morning pancakes, movie nights curled up on the couch. It meant safety. It meant peace. It meant starting over, and it had all begun with a wrong number and a stranger who chose to be a hero. The trial came in April, 6 months after that rainy October night. Derek faced multiple charges: felony domestic assault, battery, terroristic threats, and child endangerment. The prosecution had built a strong case, bolstered by Maya's text messages, Marcus's testimony, and the physical evidence of Denise's injuries documented by the hospital. Maya had been terrified at the prospect of testifying. She'd spent sleepless nights imagining Derek's eyes on her, imagining having to relive that night in front of a room full of strangers. Dr. Evans had worked with her extensively, using role-play and relaxation techniques to help her prepare. "You're not alone in that courtroom," Dr. Evans had reminded her. "Your mother will be there. Marcus will be there. I'll be there. The prosecutor will be there. And the judge and jury will be there to listen to the truth. Derek has no power over you anymore, Maya. The only power he has is what you give him." On the day of her testimony, Maya wore the purple dress her grandmother had bought her for Christmas. "Purple for courage," Grandma Louise had said. "Purple for royalty. You walk in there like a queen, baby girl." Marcus met her outside the courthouse, looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie, instead of his usual firefighter gear. He crouched down to her level, just like he had that first day in the hospital. "You've got this, Maya. Just tell the truth, exactly like it happened. You've told this story before. To the police, to your counselor, to your classmates. This is just one more time. What if I mess up? What if I forget something important? Then you take a breath and you remember. And if you really can't remember, you say so. That's okay. Nobody expects you to be perfect. They just need you to be honest. Will you stay for the whole thing? Wild horses couldn't drag me away." The courtroom was smaller than Maya had expected, more ordinary. Not like the grand chambers she'd seen in movies. Just a room with wooden benches and fluorescent lights and a flag in the corner. Derek sat at the defendant's table, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow, less like a monster and more like a man facing the consequences of his actions. When Maya took the stand, she kept her eyes on the prosecutor, a woman named Angela Washington, who had been kind and patient throughout the entire process. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't need to. "Maya, can you tell the court what happened on the night of October 15th? Ms. Washington asked, and so Maya told her story. The hiding in the closet, the sounds from the living room, the desperate text meant for 911 that went to Marcus instead, the waiting, the fear, the hope that someone, anyone, would come. She told it clearly and calmly, just like Dr. Evans had taught her. When her voice started to shake, she took a breath and continued. When tears threatened to fall, she blinked them back and kept going. And when it was over, when the defense attorney had finished his cross-examination and she was allowed to step down from the stand, Maya walked past the defendant's table with her head held high. She didn't give Derek the satisfaction of her fear. Not anymore. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Derek was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 10. When the verdict was read, Denise broke down in tears. Marcus put his arm around Maya's shoulders. Grandma Louise raised her hands to the ceiling and said, "Thank you, Jesus." And Maya just sat there, feeling something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Free. She felt free. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, drawn by the unusual human interest angle of the case. A little girl's misdirected text message that had led to a dramatic rescue. Maya hadn't wanted to talk to them, but Marcus convinced her that sharing her story might help other kids in similar situations. "You never know who's watching," he said. "Who might be hiding in their own closet right now, thinking nobody can help them. Your story could give them hope. It could show them that reaching out is worth it, even when it feels impossible." So Maya stood on the courthouse steps, her mother on one side and Marcus on the other, and answered the reporters' questions. "What would you say to other kids who might be going through what you went through?" one reporter asked. Maya thought about it for a moment. "I would say, don't give up. Don't think that nobody will help you. There are good people out there, people like Marcus, who will come when you call. Even if you dial the wrong number, even if you make mistakes, keep trying. Your voice matters. You matter. And someone, somewhere, will listen. The interview aired on the evening news and quickly went viral. Within days, Maya had become a symbol of childhood resilience, her story shared on social media and news sites around the world. Messages poured in from other survivors, from parents, from teachers and counselors and social workers. People wanted to know more about the brave little girl and the firefighter who had answered her accidental call. Marcus Williams became a regular part of Maya and Denise's lives. Not in an intrusive way, but in the way that people who have survived something together often stay connected. He checked in on them regularly, sometimes by text, sometimes with a phone call, occasionally with an in-person visit when his schedule allowed. The first few months were the hardest. Denise was dealing with the physical and emotional aftermath of years of abuse, attending therapy sessions, meeting with lawyers, trying to rebuild a sense of self that Derek had systematically destroyed. Maya was adjusting to a new school, a new apartment, a new reality where she didn't have to be afraid all the time. Marcus understood that healing wasn't linear. There were good days and bad days, steps forward and stumbles back. He'd seen it with his sister, watched her struggle to believe she deserved happiness after so many years of being told she was worthless. He knew the journey was long and that the best thing he could do was simply be present, consistent, reliable. So he showed up. He texted Maya every few days, just simple messages to let her know he was thinking about her. How was school today? Did you ace that math test? Your mom tells me you're trying out for the school play. Break a leg. He brought groceries sometimes, pretending he'd bought too much at the store and needed someone to take the extra off his hands. He fixed the leaky faucet in their new apartment, assembled the bookshelf that came with incomprehensible instructions, helped Maya with her science project about volcanoes. Small things, ordinary things, the kind of things that families do for each other. Because that's what they were becoming in their own unlikely way. A family. Maya's grandmother Louise had initially been suspicious of Marcus. She'd seen too many men come into her daughter's life with good intentions that turned sour, too many promises that dissolved into pain. She watched him carefully during those first few visits, her eyes sharp and assessing, waiting for the mask to slip. But the mask never slipped, because there was no mask. Marcus was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man who had been in the right place at the right time and refused to look away. Eventually, even Louise had to admit that her instincts about him were wrong. "I owe you an apology," she told him one Sunday afternoon, after a family dinner at the new apartment. "I thought you were too good to be true. I kept waiting for you to show your real face." "This is my real face," Marcus said simply. "I know it's hard to trust after everything Denise and Maya have been through, but I'm not going anywhere. Not unless they want me to." Louise studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay then. Welcome to the family, Marcus Williams. You've earned your place at this table." It was, Marcus thought later, one of the proudest moments of his life. Not because he needed Louise's approval, but because it meant something to Maya and Denise. It meant that the walls of distrust were finally starting to come down. He watched Maya grow from a traumatized 11-year-old into a more confident 12, then 13, then 14. He watched Denise heal, slowly but surely, rebuilding her life and her sense of self. He was there when Denise got her GED, when she landed a good job at a local hospital, when she started dating again, this time a kind man named Robert who treated her and Maya with the respect they deserved. And they were there for him too. When Marcus's daughter Jessica went through a difficult breakup, Maya texted her words of encouragement that Jessica later said meant more than anything the adults in her life had offered. When Marcus's mother passed away after a long illness, Denise and Maya came to the funeral and sat in the back row, quiet witnesses to his grief. That's how it works sometimes. The people who come into our lives by accident become the ones who stay on purpose. On the second anniversary of that rainy night, Marcus received a text from Maya. It was longer than her usual messages, more carefully composed, and he could tell she'd been thinking about what to say for a while. 2 years ago tonight, I was hiding in a closet, scared that my mum was going to die. I typed what I thought was 911, but I got you instead. At the time, I thought it was the worst mistake of my life, but now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save us that night. You changed the whole direction of our lives. My mom is happy now, really happy. And I'm happy too. I'm doing well in school. I have good friends, and I don't have to be scared anymore. None of that would have happened without you. So I just wanted to say thank you, not just for coming when I called, but for staying, for being part of our lives, for being the hero I didn't even know I was looking for. Love, Maya. Marcus read the message 3 times, tears blurring his vision. He'd received commendations and medals for his work as a firefighter, had been publicly recognized for rescues that made the evening news. But nothing in 22 years of service had ever meant as much as these words from a girl he'd met by accident on a rainy October night. He thought about the crossword puzzle he'd been working on that evening, the one with the clue he couldn't figure out. 7 letters for unexpected blessing. Now, 2 years later, he finally knew the answer. Miracle. He typed back, "You've got it backwards, Maya. You're the hero. You always were. I just showed up. You're the one who found the courage to reach out, to break the silence, to save your mom when no one else could. I'm proud of you. Prouder than I can say. And I'm grateful every day that you typed 914 instead of 911. Love, Marcus." The following spring, Marcus was invited to speak at Maya's school for Career Day. He stood in front of her 8th grade class in his dress uniform, feeling more nervous than he ever had running into a burning building. "My name is Marcus Williams, and I've been a firefighter for 22 years, he began. "But I'm not here to talk about fighting fires. I'm here to talk about a different kind of rescue. The kind that doesn't make the news, but changes lives just the same." He told them about the text message, about driving through the rain, about climbing the fire escape and breaking the window, about a little girl who had been brave enough to reach out for help, even when she thought no one would answer. He didn't use Maya's name. He'd asked her permission beforehand, and she'd said she was okay with him telling the story as long as he didn't identify her. She wasn't ready for her classmates to know the full truth yet. Maybe someday, but not today. "The thing I want you to take away from this story," Marcus concluded, "is that you never know when you might be the answer to someone's prayer. You never know when a wrong number might be exactly the right one, so pay attention, listen, and when someone reaches out for help, don't look away. Show up. Be the hero someone needs, even if they didn't know to ask for you." After the presentation, Maya caught him in the hallway. "That was really good," she said. "I think some of the kids actually listened." "You think so?" "Yeah. Trevor Morrison looked like he was about to cry, and he never cries. I think your story got to him." "Well, it's your story too. Mostly your story, actually. I just happened to be the guy who answered the phone." Maya smiled, that bright, genuine smile that he'd come to love over the past 2 years. "You always say that. But we both know you did way more than just answer the phone, and you did way more than just send a text. We're a team, Maya. We saved each other that night." She considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess we did." The story might have ended there, a beautiful tale of a wrong number that led to the right rescue. But life has a way of continuing, of spinning new chapters from the threads of old ones, of bringing things full circle in ways we never expect. 5 years after that rainy night, Maya Johnson graduated from high school as valedictorian of her class. She stood at the podium in her cap and gown, looking out at the sea of faces, the proud parents and excited classmates and tearful teachers who had watched her grow. The gymnasium was packed to capacity, folding chairs squeezed into every available space, families fanning themselves with graduation programs in the late May heat. Banners in the school colors hung from the rafters, and somewhere in the back the school band was warming up for the recessional. Her mother was in the front row, Robert beside her, both of them beaming with pride. Grandma Louise was there too, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, already crying before Maya had spoken a single word. And a few rows back, wearing his dress uniform even though he'd retired from active duty the year before, was Marcus Williams. He'd insisted on coming, even though it meant driving 3 hours from Nashville, where he'd moved to be closer to his daughter Jessica and her new baby. Wouldn't miss it for the world, he'd said when Maya invited him. I want to see my girl walk across that stage. My girl. The words had made Maya's heart swell, because that's what she was, in all the ways that mattered. Not his biological daughter, but his girl, just the same. His family. Most graduation speeches are about the future, Maya began, her voice strong and clear through the microphone. About dreams and possibilities, and all the amazing things we're going to accomplish. And I'll get to that, I promise. But first, I want to talk about the past. About a night 5 years ago that changed everything. The crowd grew quiet, sensing the weight of what was coming. When I was 11 years old, I was living in a situation no child should ever have to face. There was violence in my home, fear in my heart, and silence where there should have been help. I felt invisible. I felt powerless. I felt like no one in the world would hear me if I screamed. She paused, steadying herself. But then, one night, I decided to reach out. I was hiding in a closet, terrified, and I tried to text 911. But I was shaking so badly that I typed the wrong number. My message went to a stranger instead, a firefighter named Marcus Williams. Maya found Marcus in the crowd, met his eyes and smiled. Most people would have ignored that message, or called the police and moved on with their lives. But Marcus didn't do that. He drove through a rainstorm to my apartment. He climbed a fire escape. He broke a window. He put himself in danger to save 2 people he'd never met, and he changed the trajectory of my entire life. She looked back at the wider audience. I'm telling you this story, not because I want sympathy or applause. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something important. In a world that often feels dark and scary and out of control, there are people who will show up for you. There are strangers who will become family. There are wrong turns that lead to right places. My message to my fellow graduates is this: be the person who shows up. Be the stranger who becomes family. Be the right place that someone else's wrong turn leads to. You never know when you might receive a message meant for someone else. When that happens, don't ignore it. Don't look away. Answer it. Show up. Be the hero someone needs, even if they didn't know to ask for you. Because that's what Marcus taught me. That's what that rainy night taught me. Heroes aren't born. They're made. One choice at a time, one act of courage at a time, one answered message at a time. She paused, her eyes finding Marcus again. Marcus, if you're listening, thank you. For everything. For showing up that night and every night since. For teaching me that one person really can make a difference. For being the proof that sometimes wrong numbers lead to the right people. The applause that followed was deafening. Maya saw Marcus wipe his eyes, saw her mother sobbing openly, saw Grandma Louise raising her hands to the sky in praise. She felt the weight of every moment that had led to this one, every choice, every struggle, every small act of courage that had built upon the last. This was her moment. This was her victory, and she had earned every second of it. After the ceremony, Marcus made his way through the crowd to where Maya was standing with her family. She saw him coming and broke into a run, throwing her arms around him the same way she had in that hospital room 5 years ago. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So incredibly proud. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You were always going to be extraordinary, Maya. I just got to watch it happen." Denise joined them, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you for coming, Marcus. It means the world to her, to both of us. I wouldn't have missed it for anything." They stood together, this unlikely family forged by accident and choice, and posed for pictures that would sit on mantels and nightstands for years to come. The firefighter and the girl who texted him. The wrong number that became the most right thing in the world. Maya went on to study social work in college, driven by a desire to help other children in situations like the one she'd escaped. She specialized in domestic violence intervention, working with families in crisis, being the voice for children who felt invisible and powerless, just as she once had. Marcus retired from the fire department at 55 after 32 years of service. He spent his retirement volunteering with at-risk youth, telling his story, showing teenagers that one choice, one moment of courage, could change everything. And every year, on the anniversary of that rainy October night, they got together. Marcus, Maya, Denise, and eventually Robert, Jessica, and a growing extended family that included Maya's husband and children. They gathered around a table and shared a meal, and told the story again, the way families do with their most treasured legends. The story of a scared little girl in a closet, a message meant for 911, a wrong number that became a lifeline, and a firefighter who taught them all what it really means to be a hero. Years later, when Maya was in her 40s and Marcus was in his 70s, she wrote a book about their story. It became a bestseller, translated into 30 languages, read by millions of people around the world. The dedication page contained a single sentence, to Marcus Williams, who answered a message that wasn't meant for him and changed my life forever. Thank you for teaching me that heroes are real, that accidents can be miracles, and that sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. Marcus kept a copy of that book on his nightstand until the day he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84. At his funeral, Maya delivered the eulogy, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Marcus Williams was a firefighter for 32 years, she said. He ran into burning buildings, pulled people from car wrecks, and saved countless lives. He received medals and commendations and recognition from the mayor himself. But the rescue he was most proud of, the one he talked about until his very last day, wasn't any of those. She paused, looking at the crowded church, at all the people whose lives Marcus had touched. It was a rainy night in October, a wrong number, and a scared little girl who needed someone to answer. He answered. And in doing so, he taught me the most important lesson of my life, that we are all capable of being heroes. That courage isn't about being unafraid, but about acting despite our fears. That sometimes the most important rescue of your life will come from the most unexpected place. Marcus used to say that I was the brave one that night, that I was the hero who saved my mother. But he was wrong. We were heroes together. He showed up when I called, and I called when I needed help. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. We save each other. She looked at his casket, covered in flowers and the flag of the Memphis Fire Department. Rest now, Marcus, you've earned it. And thank you one more time for being the right person at the wrong number. I'll see you again someday. And when I do, I'll have so many stories to tell you about all the lives you changed, all the people you inspired, all the ripples that spread out from that one rainy night in October. You taught me that heroes are real. And you were the realest one I ever knew. The church was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the entire congregation was on their feet, applauding the firefighter who had spent his life running toward danger, who had answered a message meant for someone else, who had changed the world one rescue at a time. And in that applause, in that moment of collective gratitude and love, Marcus Williams' legacy lived on, as it would continue to do, in the hearts of everyone he'd touched, for generations to come, because that's what happens when you answer the call. That's what happens when you show up. That's what happens when you choose to be a hero. The years following Marcus's funeral brought new chapters to the story, new lives touched by the ripple effects of that one rainy night. Maya's work as a social worker had led her to countless families in crisis, countless children hiding in closets and bedrooms, praying for someone to answer their cries for help. She developed a program called Wrong Number, Right Person, a national initiative that trained first responders and ordinary citizens to recognize and respond to accidental cries for help. The program taught people what to do if they received a misdirected emergency text or call, how to stay calm, how to gather information, when to involve authorities. It was based on Marcus's instincts that rainy night, the choices he'd made that had saved her life and her mother's life. By codifying those instincts into a teachable framework, Maya ensured that his legacy would continue to save lives long after he was gone. The program was eventually adopted by fire departments and police departments across the country. In its first 5 years, it was credited with successful interventions in over 300 cases, situations where a misdirected message had reached a stranger who knew exactly what to do with it. 300 families saved, 300 Mayas given a second chance. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There would always be more children hiding in closets, more victims praying for rescue, more darkness that needed light. But it was a start. It was something, and it all traced back to a rainy night in Memphis, a wrong number, and a firefighter who couldn't look away. Denise Johnson lived to see her daughter's graduation, her wedding, and the birth of her first grandchild. She'd remarried when Maya was in high school to Robert, the kind man who treated her with the respect and gentleness she deserved. They'd built a good life together, a peaceful life, one that slowly erased the scars of those dark years with Derek. She passed away at 72, surrounded by family, her hand in Maya's as she took her last breath. "Thank you," she whispered at the end. "Thank you for saving me." Maya didn't know if she was talking about that night in the apartment, about the text message and Marcus and the broken window, or if she was talking about everything that came after, the years of healing and growth and rebuilding. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was all of it, wrapped up in those 2 simple words. "You saved yourself, Mom," Maya said through her tears. "I just made a phone call." "A wrong phone call," Denise corrected, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "The most important wrong phone call ever made." The story doesn't end. It just keeps growing, spreading, touching new lives in ways you never imagined. And it all starts with one choice, one moment, one message, one wrong number that turns out to be exactly right. Somewhere in America right now, a child is hiding, behind a locked door, under a bed, in the back of a closet. They're listening to sounds they shouldn't have to hear, feeling fears no child should have to feel. They're wondering if anyone in the world cares about them, if anyone would come if they called. Some of them will find the courage to reach out. Some of them will dial numbers they barely remember, send messages into the void, pray for strangers to become saviors. And some of those messages will find their way to the right people, people like Marcus Williams, people who could look away but choose not to, people who understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up. That's the legacy of a rainy night in Memphis. That's the lesson Maya Johnson spent her life teaching. That's the truth at the heart of this story, the truth that makes it worth telling again and again. Heroes are real. They walk among us every day, ordinary people capable of extraordinary things. They don't have capes or superpowers. They have choices. And when they choose to answer, when they choose to show up, when they choose to be brave, they change the world. One wrong number at a time, one life at a time, one moment of courage at a time. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. And that's how it will continue to work, for as long as there are children who need saving and strangers willing to save them. The story isn't just Maya's anymore. It isn't just Marcus's. It belongs to everyone who has ever been helped by a stranger, everyone who has ever helped a stranger, everyone who has ever had the chance to make a choice between looking away and showing up. It belongs to you. So the next time your phone buzzes with an unfamiliar number, the next time you get a message that doesn't make sense, the next time you're faced with a problem that isn't technically yours to solve, remember this story. Remember Maya in the closet. Remember Marcus in his truck driving through the rain. Remember that sometimes wrong numbers lead to the right people. And ask yourself, what would a hero do? Then do that, because someone, somewhere, might be counting on you, just like Maya was counting on Marcus, just like all of us are counting on each other. That's the real ending. That's the only ending that matters. Not an ending at all, really, just a beginning. The end of one chapter is always the beginning of another. Maya understood that now, in ways she couldn't have understood as a frightened child hiding in a closet. Life wasn't a single story with a neat conclusion. It was a series of stories, interconnected and overlapping, each one leading to the next. Her story had begun with fear and violence and a desperate plea for help. It had transformed into something beautiful, a tale of courage and connection, of strangers becoming family, of wrong numbers becoming lifelines. And now, as she looked toward the future, she knew that the best chapters were still unwritten. Whatever came next, she was ready, because she wasn't alone. She never had been, and she never would be again.